People pay good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
Everyone pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
Aprire, ho detto! Avanti, giù!
È un agguato di rizzo.
Ferma, ferma!
Guido!
Eccolo il duro. Sei contento che l'hai fatta crepare? Pazzo assassino!
Ci ho pianto, Ave Maria. Si è solo allungato il conto che il rizzo ci deve pagare.
Guido le ha detto che sono stato io a mandare gente alla corriera? Lei me lo può confermare, commissario? Me lo conferma?
Sì. Tu a rizzo non lo devi nemmeno nominare! Se non quando stai... I diamanti sono arrivati ieri. Partiranno domani col volo delle 16.
A parte te, che altro sa del colpo?
La mia donna.
Shock me, shock me. Shock me, shock me. Shock me, shock me. Shock me.
È esattamente la terza volta che dei diamanti transitano a Fiumicino. Se te li fai scappare un'altra volta, ti assicuro che io ti lascio, hai capito o no?
Questa volta si fa.
Ma lo sai che ora tocca a te?
Tocca a me cosa?
Sanno che tu sai.
Ti do 3 giorni di tempo. Sistema le tue cose e cambia città.
Guido, se esci di qui, crepi!
Se non avete motivo di trattenermi, commissario, io esco. Domenica Tony mi sparerà. Non prima.
Dove sono i diamanti? Se ti metti d'accordo con me te la cavi con le stimmate come San Francesco. Se no qui c'è il terzo chiodo. E te lo ficco nel cuore.
Da Marco volevano sapere evidentemente qualche cosa. Che cosa?
Chiedetelo a Rizzo. Ammazzami, Rizzo. Ora, qui. Perché io t'ammazzerò alla prima occasione.
Welcome to the projection booth. I'm your host, Mike White. Join me once again is Mr. Jedidiah Ayres.
Inform!
Also back in the booth is Mr. Ryan Luis Rodriguez.
Buonasera.
We continue a month of Patreon requests with one from Pat Radke, Blood and Diamonds. Written and directed by Fernando De Leo, the film stars Claudio Castagnelli as Guido Mari, who after being arrested and sent to prison for 5 years gets out and swears vengeance against those he thinks wronged him, carving a bloody path through those he once considered to be his friends and allies. We will be spoiling this film as we go along, so if you don't want anything ruined, please turn off the podcast and come back after you've seen it. We will still be here. So, Jedidiah, when was the first time you saw Blood and Diamonds, and what did you think?
I saw it 2018, according to my Letterboxd account. It was a couple years after I first saw any police attaché movies and specifically Fernando De Leo films. I think it was the great old streaming service Filmstruck had a Fernando De Leo collection, and I really loved those. And this was not part of that collection, apparently, because it wasn't until a couple years later I saw this. But by the time I saw it, it was not my favorite DeLeo. I think the impact of the first ones I saw, especially Milan Caliber 9, really, really blew me away. And I liked Blood and Diamonds right away, but it wasn't particularly special to me. But I gotta say, revisiting it for this podcast, it's become one of my favorites. I enjoy it for probably a lot of the same reasons you guys do that I'll wait to get into.
And Ryan, how about yourself?
Similar to Jedidiah, I've been aware of DeLeo for years. Criterion Channel in 2023 had a big selection of his, the former owners of Filmstruck. They had Caliber 9, The Italian Connection, The Boss, and Shoot First, Die Later, and I had heard of Blood and Diamonds, but it was not part of that collection. So the first time I actually watched it was 2 days ago. And I only picked it because when you were soliciting guests for this season, it was one of the ones that had an empty box next to it. So I was like, oh yeah, I'll just put my name there. And then I realized after maybe an hour later, like, oh, that's a DeLeo film that'll fill a hole in my knowledge, and now I have it. So thank you for doing that.
Well, I appreciate that you are willing to take a shot on a movie that you don't even know what it is. So not everybody's like that.
It couldn't be worse than Red Lights.
This was also a pretty new film for me. I have a massive blind spot when it comes to a lot of Italian films, especially these poliziotteschi films. I remember speaking with Mike Malloy, Eurocrime documentary director Mike Malloy, back a long time ago. We talked about The Italian Connection, which I think is also a DeLeo film. And yeah, I just haven't seen that many of these movies. I have seen a lot more spaghetti westerns than I've seen these kinds of movies. And I think I've seen more French policiers or French noirs than I have any of these things. So it's a very brave new world for me. And then when I was trying to listen to the commentary, and I think we'll talk about the commentary a little bit later, I mean, pretty much the whole commentary is just these two yahoos just dropping names of other films the entire time. So it's like, oh, and then this is like this, and this is like this, and this is like this. I'm like, could you maybe talk about the movie that you're actually supposed to be talking about? But anyway, made a big list of all these other movies, and I tried watching some of those. I didn't have the most successful time, but it sounds like this movie is in conversation with earlier DeLeo, which is Milan Caliber 9 or Caliber 9. And they almost called this Rome Caliber 9, so almost like a follow-up movie. But it sounds like this movie starts almost the exact same way that the other one ends. So I did watch a little bit of Caliber 9, but I cannot say, oh yeah, this is a natural bookend for the other film.
Yeah, I didn't make that connection whatsoever. But I also want to add that Eurocrime is an outstanding documentary. If you want to know more about this subgenre, it's always streaming somewhere. I don't know where it is at the moment, but I've seen it at least twice on completely different streaming services. So if you're listening to this and you're interested, first of all, go to Tubi and watch Blood and Diamonds, where it is streaming for free. Then look up Eurocrime on Real Good, and you will have a good double feature there.
I'd like to echo that sentiment. I love that documentary. I've seen it a few times. And in fact, I just watched it yesterday or the day before, and I think it was on Tubi that it's streaming. I hadn't made the Milan Caliber 9 connection until listening to the commentary track, and they mentioned it, and then suddenly things really clicked for me, and I said, oh yeah, this is really kind of the same situation. You know, a guy gets out of prison after, when he gets out of prison, everybody thinks he's got, a score to settle with his former boss, and he's pressured by the gangsters who were his former friends and by the police to come clean and get protection because he's vulnerable, because everybody's just waiting for this guy to get rubbed out. The difference, though, is that the situations end up being kind of like mirror opposites as far as what the truth of the situation is. And it is fun to have Barbara Boucher in both movies playing ultimately pretty similar roles. I do think they make a nice conversation. They start the same. It's not Caliber 9 ends where Blood and Diamonds begins, but Blood and Diamonds just has the little precursor, the little setup of you see him before he goes to prison, and then the opening credits happen and he's getting out of prison, whereas Caliber 9 just starts with him getting out of prison. So good double feature. Caliber 9 is my favorite, both DeLeo film and of the Poliziotteschis I've seen. I know a lot of folks like the Italian Connection more. I do like the Italian Connection, and it's perhaps more in the spirit and feel of a lot of the Poliziotteschis movies. It's bigger action and broader lead performances and things like that. But I really do like the kind of more somber, noirish overtones of Caliber 9 and Blood and Diamonds.
And when he gets out of prison, it's a 5-year time cut that happens over the course of like a minute. The narrative of this movie is not fucking around. Like, it immediately sets off, and like he gets nabbed in the first 2 minutes. You see the prison, this gothic brutalist compound. You see him come out, and then immediately that's when the revenge starts. It's literally, there's no wasted time getting to the plot.
Yeah, I thought maybe Caliber 9 ended with that shot of the phone and the J&B, but it ends with that shot of the cigarette still burning instead. That's why I was kind of hoping like it was literally like the two shots matched up or something, but no, it's definitely not that case.
I see, yeah. I misunderstood.
I see where you're coming from, and I see why my words would say that, but I was really hoping that there would be more of a connection there, and it'd be like the same shot opening or something. But the main character, Guido, he thinks that he's been set up, and he was set up. But he thinks he was set up by basically his boss, by Rizzo, who's played by Martin Balsam. But he was not set up by Rizzo. So like this whole movie is him trying to get revenge on Rizzo, and it's completely wrong-headed. As soon as he gets out of prison, he takes a bus with his wife/girlfriend. I'm not sure what their relationship is, but Olga Carlotas playing Maria, and gets out of prison, and these two bandits show up and they try to rob the bus that he and all these other people are on. And he says to himself out loud, Rizzo must have sent these two goons to kill me. And that's his whole thing. After he thinks that he has been set up to be killed coming out of prison, I don't know why they wouldn't have killed him in prison, but coming out of prison, that becomes his whole thing, and he's wrong. He's wrong through the whole movie. So you're just like, okay, but it's an interesting thing as far as when we find out that he's wrong versus when he finds out, and then just how that changes everything when he finds out that he is wrong and who the actual person that set him up was. And I kept thinking the whole time through so much of this that it was actually, I think his friend's name is Marco. I kept thinking that it was Marco maybe that set him up, because Marco, it feels like Marco is kind of it feels like that this movie really influenced A Better Tomorrow. This whole thing of Marco, who escaped from this stuff, but he was lame, so he's going around, with a limp and everything, and he works at this auto body shop. And so I just kept thinking of like the T-Lung character who runs that taxi stand for ex-criminals, and then, Mark, who got the bullet in his knee and that he's just kind of limping around afterwards. But yeah, I thought that maybe Wu had seen this and had picked up on some of those things for Better Tomorrow, because there are some elements of these gangster films that play really well with the Hong Kong films later on.
And it's important to add that the guys who try to rob the bus kill his lady love, which I think only intensifies that desire for revenge. And Martin Balsam, amazing to say, fits in really well with the rest of the Italian cast. A lot of times when they cast American actors in these roles, they look like Americans hanging out with Italian people, but this guy really blends in. And probably because Balsam was such a good actor, but even with the dubbed voice, he fits in perfectly. Absolutely.
Well, it's him dubbing himself, though, right?
It is? Well, I didn't know.
I think it is. At least in the version I saw.
Because it sounds a little different.
Watching these films, most of them, or at least several of them, and several of the first ones I saw are available either dubbed in English or in Italian. And I do think it makes a difference how you first see them. I think the first time I saw Caliber 9, it was in Italian with subtitles. And watching it later, dubbed in English, it does give it a different feel. I love both versions, but the whole dubbing and versus subtitle, I mean, that would be dubbed too because they didn't shoot with live sound, but reading subtitles and hearing a dubbed actor, it really does make for a different experience, I think, with the films. And Blood and Diamonds and Milan Caliber 9 specifically, with their sort of more sober tone than, a lot of the really gonzo action ones in the genre. The gonzo action ones, I think that dubbed quality kind of adds to the frenetic energy of the things. But these more somber ones, I think, if you watch them dubbed, I think you come away with a different feeling than you do if you watch them subtitled. So,
yeah, this one's definitely more contemplative than the rest of the bunch. I tried to clock if anything could count as a car chase, and I don't think there is one, which there is in all the other ones. Yeah, somber is the right word, I think. It's definitely it's a more morose crime picture that as opposed to the excesses, the fun excesses of the other ones.
I made the mistake of watching this English dubbed with English subtitles on it. So the English subtitles were for the Italian version. So it pointed out all of the times that the subtitler was deciding, and I'm taking it that the subtitler was only subtitling things that we hear on screen. So sometimes there are lines that were put in the English version that we didn't hear in the Italian version. It was very strange, especially if there's somebody on screen and their mouth is hidden. The subtitles might have an extra line in there as opposed to the English version where you weren't hearing them say something. So like a phrase or something would pop up on screen. I'm like, nobody's talking right now, but apparently in the Italian version they were. So yeah, it was a very strange experience for me trying to make my way through that. And like, I can't imagine watching Caliber 9 without Lionel Stander's voice, because that is such a part of him as a person and as an actor that, kind of like Martin Balsam, I was just like, yeah, I can't imagine watching this without his voice.
Watching it dubbed and subtitled at the same time is like that episode of News Radio where Jimmy James had his autobiography translated into Japanese and then back into English.
Soon, Super Karate Monkey Death Car would park in my space.
And then you have Super Monkey Death Car and just stuff that makes absolutely no sense.
Caliber 9 has a slight advantage too because it's got Mario Adorf in there, who is fucking amazing. But this movie has Pier Paolo Capone, I believe is how you pronounce the gentleman's name, as Tony, who basically is that same role from Caliber 9, but oh my god, and I wish people could see what you look like right now, Jedidiah, with the major fat tie that's tied around your neck and not around the collar, because...
Not around the collar's open, yeah.
Because Tony has this weird fashion sense where he's wearing, it looks like multiple ties hanging around his neck, or maybe an incredibly long cravat. I don't know what's going on with it.
It's so delightfully garish.
He's great. He's great. And every time he shows up, he's just like a mad dog, and he just keeps yelling, conform, conform. And I'm like, okay.
You gotta stop that moaning when Tony's talking to you. Conform, huh? Conform. Now, as I was saying,
That line is great, and I wonder if it was the Italian, what the Italian word was that they were, because on that Eurocrime doc, they spent some time talking with voice actors who did the dubbing, and they talked about how, well, first the actors talked about how there was a lot of improvising going on, just like get the essence of that scene from Dirty Harry or from Bullet, say it kind of the same, make it your own, and then the dubbers are watching the lip movement and trying to find words that fit the lip movement, and so that he's saying conform is kind of funny and kind of, you think it means one thing, but then at the end, when after he's killed Marco and he's confronting Guido about how Guido's got all his friends killed basically, but he's confessing that he didn't like killing Marco because Marco was a stand-up guy and really went out like a man. He said he conformed. He conformed all the way. It's like, wait, I thought that meant one thing, and you're saying, yeah, the usage, I'm not really sure what the intent was and what the actual word they're transcribing is, but it's a hell of a character catchphrase.
Tu non devi fiatare quando parla a Tony. Conforme. Dicevo.
And to piggyback on the Eurocrime thing, the one thing missing in all DeLeo movies is piss torture.
I haven't seen all the DeLeo movies, but I've seen all the Polizia ones and adjacent, crime and action ones. There's a few of the erotic dramas and sex comedies I don't think I've been able to find, but I will say he's my favorite of the Polizia directors that I'm aware of. Yeah, I've probably seen 20 or 30 Polizia films total, out of hundreds and hundreds. So not a great sampling, but I think he's considered one of the more important contributors. And even with him, there's a fairly wide gap between his best examples in the genre and his lesser examples. So, I'd say there's 4 or 5 of his that I like quite a bit. And I've seen a few that I really don't care for. I don't feel like I know him as a person, having watched what I've watched. I feel like, there's some directors that I feel I understand something about their personality, and I don't know that I've got that connection. I wish I knew more about him. I've read just a couple of fairly brief things, biographical things, and Mike, you sent that documentary about him that seemed to be people reading his poetry for forever.
Eventually it changes. That opening was brutal, though, especially because they make you read it on screen and then they go to the guy and then he reads it again. You're just like, oh my God. So about 5 minutes in, it actually becomes like a real documentary.
Well, yeah, I mean, I watched the whole thing, but I was a little lulled by all the poetry. If you guys know about him, I would love to hear your thoughts on who he was and what his films say about him. But of the Polizia stuff specifically, even in that small number of films he made, there's a pretty wide gap between his best and his lesser efforts.
Yeah, I don't seem to get a real beat on him through his films. At least the ones that I've seen. I know that he was supposed to be very leftist, one of those wokesters, I think is. So that's probably why we don't know that much, because, you go woke, you go broke. And that's why probably shouldn't even be talking about this movie.
He went out of style when woke was not cool yet. So, he was ahead of everybody. Dying in 2003, he was, he knew woke before we ever had a definition.
If that's true, I know that there are some leftist ideas debated, especially in Caliber 9, the police chiefs, there's one leftist and one fascist, and they spend a fair amount of the film debating policing philosophies and things like that. But, the genre itself is, often fairly fascist, frankly. It was a lot of really over the top police heroes and vigilante heroes who just, slaughter their way and torture their way through suspects and underworlds, and we're rooting for them most of the time too. I make no bones about really enjoying those films, but it's funny that a subgenre with so many pretty fascist examples would have leftist crews and directors behind them.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was Italy. It didn't all change after Mussolini was hung upside down. There were still a lot of fascist sympathizers and a ton of communist sympathizers at the same time. This was like the prime time of the Red Brigade, the Brigado Russo. And then to find out that this movie came out, what was it, the day after the prime minister was kidnapped by the Red Brigade and killed box office because nobody was in the mood to have fun and go see a movie.
It's like when Hardball came out in the wake of 9/11 and people were like, I can't watch a movie about Keanu Reeves teaching a bunch of kids how to play baseball. It's not what I'm feeling right now. I'd rather go see Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back for the third time, which is actually an autobiographical moment that I've just illustrated.
Didn't Pootie Tang come out right around that time as well? And I think that ruined...
Yeah, earlier that summer, but that definitely happened.
Nobody wanted to see Pootie Tang.
For the 5 people who are aware of Pootie Tang.
Yeah, the police inspector is fantastic. I really like this guy. And again, feels very Woo to me as far as, and also very Jean-Pierre Melville as far as the police inspector who actually cares for the criminal and wants the criminal to go straight, kind of really empathizes with this guy. It really feels like the police inspector is more of a father figure to Guido than anybody else and really wants him to look at what's going on and really defends him quite a bit throughout this entire thing. And it's good that he's there because Guido as a character, he's just kind of a cipher. And I hear that DeLeo liked working with this guy because he didn't give a lot of emotion, and I can really see that. He's kind of an automaton through this whole movie.
Yeah, I have in my notes here, protagonist of inaction. He doesn't really do much. He kind of stands there, kind of observing everything that goes on. And I noticed that he looks like if you had an article on a newspaper with Christopher Lambert and Jason Clarke in the same frame, and you took Silly Putty and you put it on it, and then you pull it off, and whatever mangled face you would have that resembles both men, like some kind of transporter accident in The Fly, that's what you would have. You would have this guy's face.
That's pretty accurate. That's pretty good. I like that. I was thinking this last time watching it, how he was physically the opposite of Gaston Moschen, who played Ugo Piazza, the protagonist of Caliber 9. And Gaston is kind of he looks like a motherfucker, looks like the Thing. He's got the fire plug head, bald head, and he's just kind of, he's not heavy, but he's really thick and a slab of stone, and he acts that way too. He's completely blank and expressionless through, the first 90% of the film. And then at the very end, there's a big change. Whereas Castanelli is, kind of more, he's not, I wouldn't say gaunt, but he's got that narrow face and that kind of floppy hair but he also is just totally blank and just, there's just rage boiling underneath him for the whole movie, but he's not, it's only in his eyes, and he never is yelling. He's never showing emotion except through his eyes until the end of the film too.
It's either rage or gas.
And of course, at the end of the film, that turns into to deep sadness. And, as he realizes he's, his own mistakes have cost the lives of everyone he loved, and he was a fool. And I find that final scene between Martin Balsam and him to be very moving, frankly. I like it a lot. I think every time I watch it, it gets more powerful. And yeah, Martin Balsam is terrific through the whole picture, especially when you know the truth about his character. Really good shit. And I like that speech he gives at the end, that I've got to do this to make an example of you, Not because I can't get over what you did to me or whatever, but for them, he's called an audience of all his underworld contacts and henchmen and things like that. Like, they have to learn what it means to be in this life. And yeah. And of course, I guess we're spoiling everything else, but I don't want to spoil the decision he makes at the very end there. So either you guys can if you want, but I won't leave that on my comments here. It's just it's a great scene.
But I love all those guys in that scene, all standing by their white cars, and the way that the white cars are all lined up. It's kind of like the opposite of a funeral, but yet they're meeting in this kind of dingy, looks like a parking garage or something. I'm like, oh, okay, this works. I think he calls it a funeral, but it looks like the opposite of a funeral with those no hearse or anything.
And I'm glad you brought up Melville, because that's definitely a key point in a lot of these is it Polichetti? I don't want to mispronounce it.
I think everybody who says it mispronounces it. So
okay, well then Polichetti, whatever these policey movies. There's definitely the code of conduct that is very much a Melville construct, and the kind of idea of the process of criminality and what it takes to kind of live that life is very much a Melville thing. Like, you won't confuse it with Les Cercle Rouge anytime soon, but it's definitely like the feet on the ground level of Melville.
Definitely, they all have that code, and the whole thing is like, who violated the code? Who's the one that tipped off the cops that I was going to be doing this thing and sent me up the river? And trying to figure that out. And, he's got so many different people that he can basically choose from. He goes right for the boss, obviously, but this whole thing of like, isn't it Maria's son? Is that how that works?
Enzo,
yeah. Who is kind of like the younger thief that Bob LaFlambert takes under his wings. And luckily, I know he kind of screws up here and there, but he doesn't actually betray Bob, like, knowingly. Whereas this guy is just like, oh yeah. And it's funny because you see, like, you were talking about the second time you watch it, you get more, and especially you get more of the Balsam character. And it's like, well, the second time I watched it, I saw Enzo, opening up the door and looking at Guido before he goes on that job. And I'm like, oh, okay. Things just kind of really started to click more for me. And then, yeah, when you see Balsam knowing that he didn't call for this and just is kind of confused, like, why is Guido doing this stuff? Why does he think I'm the one that set him up? I really appreciate this even more. And I can see liking this movie a second, third, fourth time more than I did even the first time.
And Enzo has the saddest eyes, just of any, so expressive, so very mournful, and very, like, it's clear that some part of his life has been taken away without his consent. And he's just he's getting through the motions, basically.
The saddest eyes and the hottest girlfriend.
Oh, yeah.
Barbara Bouchette with her dance number that she's doing to that amazing song. What was it? Shock Me. And I kept thinking of Ace Frehley.
In a nightclub where they have the name of the nightclub indoors on the wall, just in case you came in and forgot where you were. Or unless, I've never been to a nightclub, so maybe that's what it's like. Maybe Studio 54, every single wall said 54 on it. I don't know, I can't say. But usually if you walk into a nightclub, you're pretty sure where you are.
Yeah, Tech Noir and the Terminator did that too, right?
Yes, in case you're on your cell phone, you're just like, I'm at the Tech Noir.
Digga, this is Sarah. Pick up if you're there. I'm at this place on Pico Boulevard called Tech Noir. I'm really scared.
Another connection, of course, between Blood and Diamonds and Caliber 9 is Barbara Boucher as a go-go dancer there's a great sequence in Caliber 9 where it's, shot at the low angles of her in a bikini go-go dancing. And I will never complain about those scenes being as long as they are, but they are long scenes.
She must have had a non-nudity clause, because there are topless dancers right behind her.
Well, she does get nude a couple of times in the film, but you're right. In that number, she doesn't. And the ladies behind her seem to be having a very good time.
Yeah, of course, I was thinking of, we recently watched a Jess Franco movie, and there was a whole thing at a nightclub, and I was like, oh boy, I hope this doesn't go that way, because it was basically simulated sex in the nightclub. And so I'm like, no, I don't really need to see that again. But luckily they avoided that. And yeah, and I think there's a couple sex scenes, or at least one I remember from Caliber 9 but it's more nudity from the back, if memory serves. I'm not sure. It's amazing that as you get older, you don't watch movies just for the nudity anymore.
It's funny, when I grew up very sheltered, without cable and without being allowed to watch much. I started when I was able to rent movies. I was still living at my parents' house. So I couldn't, go see R-rated films, but I could rent them, unless that one lady at the grocery store was working. She wouldn't rent me. She wouldn't rent me Bloodsport or Point Break or any of those. But I found, yes, I was absolutely, you remember those books, a precursor to Mr. Skin was the Bear Essentials? Like Bear Essentials
yes.
Video guide. And, I would find a lot of interesting things to watch that way. And it was funny. I was renting a lot of like kind of highbrow art films, European and Asian stuff, and a lot of really trashy exploitation and, straight to video action movies. So I grew up with, I didn't have anybody who was a movie watcher telling me what I should watch. I was pretty much looking for nudity all the time. And that led me into, simultaneous, very different paths, the art film and the exploitation, cheapo, schlocky stuff, because they both tracked in nudity that you didn't get in those, copious amounts in a lot of the fare that I was at the movie theaters.
When I was growing up and actually cared about nudity in movies, there was an issue of Maxim magazine with Tara Reid on the cover, because I will never forget it. It's the only time I bought a Maxim magazine at a supermarket and nobody looked at me and said, "Aren't you a little young to be purchasing this?" They're like, "Yeah, whatever, fuck it, take it." And it had inside the 50 best sex scenes in all of movies. And I managed to track down, I think, maybe 47 of them. And I felt so accomplished. And then I grew another 2 years and then ultimately didn't care anymore. And then I actually started watching movies for the plot, for the aesthetics, for all the stuff that doesn't involve boobies.
I'll get there someday.
There's not a lot to talk about when it comes to this movie, because it just seems to follow pretty well-worn paths. I wasn't surprised by much. There wasn't a really tense robbery scene. There weren't like a lot of showcase scenes. It's not like the robbery is just a thing. And even when it comes to, they've got all these uncut diamonds, and eventually Guido and Marco go and decide to rip them off because, how dare Rizzo set me up, all this kind of stuff. It's an okay scene, but it's not like some sort of like balls to the wall action type of thing. Like you were talking about before, Ryan, there's not a lot of chasing in here. There's a chase through a junkyard at one point, but it's all on foot. It's not a motorcycle race. I mean, as part of my research for this, I watched a little bit of, what was it? Live Like a Cop, Die Like a Man, which
Ruggero Deodato.
DeLeo had written that one. So I was like, oh, let me check that out. And I mean, that motorcycle chase or dirt bike.
Right up front.
Yeah, right up front. Yeah. And it is amazing. Oh, it's so well done. And yeah, it just really kicks things into high gear.
The thing that really surprised me watching this is that one of the bad guys drops a reference to Diabolic.
Yes, I thought that was great.
I was struck by it because I was like, oh yeah, every country has its own self-referential pop culture. Quentin Tarantino didn't invent that. It's not an inherently American thing. Everybody has their culture. And, stuff might cross over to America, like Godzilla is now the suffix Zilla can now be applied to anything. But really, it's a Japanese pop culture artifact.
And I want to say that it's Diabolic in the captions, in the subtitles, but it's Superman in the dub.
That's interesting because when he's beating up Guido, he calls him the Steel Man, but never calls him the Man of Steel, which is very, very interesting.
You ain't got iron inside you. He's just like all of us. No Iron Man, no way. And Ritza's always saying that you're a man of iron. Nah, he's right. You're made of iron, all right. Only a man of iron could have did what you done.
Yeah, he's touching Guido earlier in the film after the robbery where he gets his girlfriend killed and then he kills the two robbers. And he's all over the news and Tony comes in and he's touching him like his abs and things like that, saying, is there iron in there? Is there steel? So yeah, I think that, when he comes back and tells him that he's killed Marco at the end, he's like, well, he was full of steel. He was the Iron Man. You're soft, but he was iron.
And really, it's Guido's freaking fault that Marco got killed. It's like, what are you doing?
It is. I thought the first time I saw this, and probably the second time I saw it too, Guido goes to Marco's body shop after he's out of prison. We get Marco at the beginning of the film when he's doing the heist, but then 5 years later, he's a mechanic and he's got a limp and, that he got during the robbery. But when they see each other for the first time after Guido's getting out of prison, Marco is wearing this like really pink shirt and he's got this feathery hairdo that looks kind of partially combed over. It may even be a hairpiece. I don't know. It's very feathery and he looks like he's wearing makeup. Like he looks very glam rock, frankly. And I thought perhaps there was a gay subtext to their relationship that, Marco was really in love with him because of how soft and effeminate he looked in that scene. I mean, he's got the muscles and, he's a tough guy to the end there. But I was struck the first few times I watched it at that shot of him in the pink shirt and the, looking very made up. And his we talked about Enzo's soulful eyes, but Marco's eyes were pretty soulful there too. And I don't think that is actually plays out. I don't think that was the intent, but that Marco is an interesting character. I like, and we're supposed to like him, and we're supposed to feel terrible that he gets killed, and we're supposed to feel as bad as Guido does at the end when you realize, all these people that he loved died for nothing because he, made a mistake.
Maria would have gotten killed anyway, but everybody else.
I don't think so. No, because she only gets killed because he assumes the robbers are there for him and he runs into, and it's when she starts running because he's running that she gets shot in the back. I believe Martin Balsam when he says he has no idea who those, guys were and they didn't have anything to do with it. And so I think the robbery probably would have gone off without a hitch if Guido hadn't leapt into action, assuming that they were there to kill him. So it's not unreasonable for Guido to, have that kind of instinct, but it is a wrong instinct. And it causes his attitude to calcify because once Maria's dead, he's never going to listen to reason, talking to Martin Balsam. He's too wounded already to ever think he was wrong.
Well, I do have to agree with you, Ryan. I think that Balsam does fit in very well with these Italian actors and these gangsters that he's hanging around with. I think the big sideburns help quite a bit, but I mean, he's just so good. And it's just always so nice to see Balsam show up in anything. And yeah, I really enjoyed his character. And yeah, especially that speech at the end that he gives, I thought was just really, really well done.
The only cast member missing was Henry Silva. That's how you know you're watching an Italian exploitation film, is when Henry Silva pops up. You go, of course, now I know exactly what kind of movie I'm watching. And he's actually in, I believe, The Italian Connection and The Boss.
Those are two of the best of, I think, the whole genre, but definitely of DeLeo's films.
It was always nice to see those American actors show up in these things. And I know that was always like the box office draw, which is just so weird to me, because like, who's going to see a movie because of Martin Balsam being in it other than a weirdo like me? The box office appeal of Ernest Borgnine in 1978 or something. It's like, okay. I mean, he was a fantastic part of that Super Cop movie with Hill and
Superfuzz. Going back to the Eurocrime documentary, Christopher Mitchum is being interviewed at one point. I have no reason to think he's mistaken, but, I did not do my own research on this, but he says, that in like Asia, it was like between him and Clint Eastwood and I forget who the other actor is, maybe Steve McQueen or something like that. It was like, depending on which one of us had the most recent movie out, we were the three biggest movie stars in Asia. He was saying who we think is a big movie star here, is not the same thing as it doesn't translate the same way around the world. And no one would ever put Chris Mitchum and Clint Eastwood at the same ranking, categories here. But apparently in Asia, that was the case. And so, who knows? Maybe Martin Balsam had an appeal. I mean, he's certainly brings value to everything. And he's great in Confessions of a Police Captain, which I think was his first Italian crime movie that he made in like 1971. So, it makes sense that he keeps coming back to these, because I think that was an important film for the genre. And he was right out front leading that one with Franco Nero.
In Italy, the big draw was Charlie Bronson. He was kind of relegated to just like the revenge seeker roles in America, but over in Italy, he would be top billed in like The Great Escape.
You know what? I would probably top bill him in The Great Escape as well.
He's digging tunnels.
Like that and House of Wax. Like that we're gonna sell this on a mute performance. It's like, okay, well, it worked.
I have to check something because I was watching that DeLeo documentary and there's a shot and they say, oh, this is from La Seduzione from 1973. And it's a shot of this guy wearing a very loud jacket with this blonde and brunette following him down these stairs. And I was like, no, that's not from La Seduzione unless they reused that shot in Blood and Diamonds, because that's the guy who's supposed to be cutting or grinding the diamonds. So I'm like, no, that's from that. So I don't know. Unless if DeLeo was, because it's the same actor, the same guy with the big glasses. I'm like, why would you cheat a shot like that? Why would you just steal a shot from your own movies? That doesn't make any sense. So now I have a thing, because I know that part of this soundtrack was used for another movie as well. But I have to say, I really like the score for this. I thought there's a couple really groovy musical cues, not including Shock Me, of course, which is just the best.
It's Luis Bacalov. And I only recognize that name because earlier that same day that I watched Blood and Diamonds, I watched the first Kill Bill. And there's at least 2 Luis Bacalov tracks on that soundtrack. And I'm pretty sure Tarantino had to pull it from one of these DeLeo movies because he's a huge DeLeo fan.
I remember getting to a verbal argument with some film nerd who was insisting that all of the music was written for Kill Bill. I'm like, what?
Like, no, like 3 tracks out of 45.
Are you fucking insane? Like, most of these composers are already dead. Like, Morricone was still alive, but most of them had passed on well before. I'm like, you're fucking crazy, man. Do your research.
Yeah, nobody knows that Quentin Tarantino created The Green Hornet.
And Ironsides, too.
That's right. He also wrote and directed Twisted Nerve. All these great films, they're all part of the Tarantino legacy.
Out of curiosity, Jedidiah, how many movies did you watch for this episode?
Like about 70.
Jesus Christ.
Martin Balsam movies, and I tried to watch some more Castanelli films. And yeah, I watched as many Fernando de Leos as I could get. I watched several of the movies he wrote and didn't direct. Yeah, there's a lot of just kind of not a lot of distinction to my memory here.
That's dedication.
I mentioned that commentary earlier. Did you listen to that one, Ryan?
I didn't get a chance to, but if it's still up on the drive, I'm definitely taking a look, because it sounds like speaking of Tarantino, the Edgar Wright and Tarantino commentary for Hot Fuzz, where all they do is just back and forth recommend movies to each other and don't even talk about the movie. I'm actually doing an episode on that tomorrow, and I just rewatched it today, and it's one of those things where it's like, oh my God, they talk about the movie for maybe 45 seconds, and it's terrific.
That's pretty much it. They just go back and forth and basically are banding about titles. It almost feels like a dick measuring contest as far as who knows the more obscure Italian film. And then sometimes not even Italian films, but just going back and forth. And then, and then it's that typical IMDb, like, oh, and this is Martin Balsam, who the year before was in this one. I'm like, you're just looking at the IMDb. Why are you doing this? I could go to the IMDb just as easily as you can. You don't have to tell me their entire filmography, when they died, how they died. And then the whole thing that I was talking about with the kidnapping of the prime minister, I was like, they make a little mention of that. Like, oh yeah, some bad stuff happened when this movie came out. And they barely talk about it. I'm like, come on, this is a major crime that happens and overshadows the film. Like, I would like to know more about that, but thank goodness for Wikipedia, I guess.
I thought the commentary was okay. I mean, I definitely, I didn't know all these actors. All the names, terribly racist of me, but they all sound the same to me. I'm having a hard time keeping track of, but they knew everybody who was in, 30 of these movies in 10 years. And it's like, wow, no, I wouldn't have known that. It's been fun having the stats feature on Letterboxd now, because I could see, oh yeah, I have no idea who this person is, but apparently I've watched, 7 of their movies.
Well, I didn't realize that I had seen a lot of Vittorio Caprioli films, that he's the guy that played the inspector. And when I pull up his IMDb, there's a picture of him and another dude, and then Pierre Richard, who was in a ton of Francis Verber films. And I actually watched one of those called La Magnifique, which is Verber, I think, had a very little part in the writing of that, but that was the one with Jean-Paul Belmondo, where he's writing a book and then also fantasizing about being in the book, and in the book everything is wonderful and everything, and his girlfriend Jacqueline Bisset is all about like giving him all this sex, but then when he's actually in real life and trying to write it, it's like everything's distracting him. And it was cute. I mean, we've seen that play out, that whole like book versus reality thing so many times, but I thought they handled it very well in that film. So I recommend Le Magnifique.
Well, unfortunately, they never made a Blood and Diamonds animated series with a purple beaver.
All right, we're going to take a break and play a preview for next week's show right after these brief messages.
Of all the gin joints in all the towns in all the world, she walks into mine.
It's been a long time.
Announcing the 50th anniversary collector's edition video of Casablanca.
Play it once then, for all time's sake.
He's looking at you, kid.
Casablanca, $19.98 or less after $5 mail-in rebate with purchase of Taster's Choice.
I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
That's right. We're back next week with a talk about a very obscure film from 1942. It's called Casablanca. Until then, I want to thank my co-host, Ryan and Jedidiah. So, Ryan, what is the latest with you, sir?
I am still working on a One Track Mind, which is an audio commentary-focused podcast, very much into physical media, and trying to keep it alive, where every other week, myself and a guest will review a movie based on its audio commentary. And you can find that on Facebook and Podchaser. I'm on Blue Sky at onetrackmind.bsky.social, and still on Instagram, spelled differently with the number 1 instead of spelled out ONE, Trackmind Podcast. And I also do Reels of Justice, a fake movie court where we have a prosecutor, defender, judge, and jury try to conclude whether or not a movie is guilty of being a bad movie. That's every week instead of every other week. And you can find that on all the social medias except for Blue Sky, unfortunately. They're still on the dreaded Bird app, and it's at Reels of Justice.
And Jedidiah, anything to share?
Deleted all my social media. So I'm on Letterboxd if you want to keep track of, the hundreds of movies I'm watching this year. But dabbling in a little fiction writing, but not a lot going on.
Well, thank you so much, guys, for being on the show. Thanks to everybody for listening. If you want to hear more of me shooting off my mouth, check out some of the other shows that I work on. They're all available at weirdingwaymedia.com. Thanks especially to our Patreon community. If you want to join the community, visit patreon.com/projection booth. Every donation we get helps the projection booth take over the world.
Shock me, shock me.
I do you voodoo.
Shock me, shock me.
So nice. Mr. Hyde?
Shock me.
Dracula?
Shock me.
Frankenstein's still alive?
Shock me. 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 Shock me.